All right, don't worry. Stop worrying. It's going to be a great show. I know you're like, it's Wednesday. Are they just going to mail it in? But no, we're going to do a great episode of Catholic Answers Live today. Second hour, we got Dr. Popcak coming in from More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak. First hour, Trent Horn, and we're going to do tips for defending the faith. If you are in need of any tips for defending the faith, 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. I am Cy Kellett, your host. And Trent, welcome.
Welcome, Cy.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not going to tease you today because it happened again.
What happened?
Another email from a person who does not like that I tease you.
Another one?
Another one. Another.
Score another one for Team Trent.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently, people do not think it is funny or engaging or in any way entertaining that I tease you.
Please know that I do not mind when Cy Kellett. I wouldn't even call it teasing. I would call it playful banter.
Well, not everybody sees it that way.
So in our routine, am I the straight man, basically? Is that how this is coming? I don't know, because
you usually come out with the little zinger one-liners that move us on to the next thing, but you don't direct them at me.
No, they're just...
See, I like, especially because I sometimes...
I send them off into the void.
There's Carlo. Hi, Carlo.
Mr.
Nice when
Carlo
comes by the studio.
That's right. He's up at the second hour, right?
No, Dr. Greg Popcak, second hour.
Oh, you got a shirt and tie. He must be off to doing something really fun and fancy. Whoa. I haven't worn a tie. I have not worn a tie since the conference. Since the fancy dinner at the conference. I don't even wear a tie when I speak.
Oh, you don't?
No, I don't believe it.
And you haven't even been doing much speaking anyways.
Well, at least not to people.
Oh, you talk to yourself. You can't get any speaking engagement. Say, no, see, now, is that teasing you if I say that? If I joke with, no, I don't want to joke with you.
You can joke with me.
I'm not going to do it.
No, come on.
Because another letter of complaint, don't stop hurting Trent Horn's feelings. It's not funny. You're teaching my children the wrong values, so I'm just not going to do it
Did
anymore.
They say you were teaching children the wrong values?
Something like that. 888-318-7884, our number, 888-318-7884.
Yeah.
It's tips for defending the faith today, and you could not get a better person than Trent Horn for tips for defending the faith. He's been defending, first, the pro-life position, defending life in all its stages, in all its forms, in all of its conditions, and then he became a Catholic apologist, defending the faith, defending the church, and he's got, I don't know, he's almost every week he's got a new degree or a new book. So I don't know how many degrees he's got. I don't know how many books he's got, but he can defend the Catholic
I know
faith.
that I have 3 graduate level degrees. I think I have 9 books. It's
Really?
eventually like children. I think any large family here could know by the time you get more than 10, like, how many do we have again? How many? Are you one of our kids or one of the other kids? When you go to the playground and you have 10 kids, you get to the point where you're like, wait, are you one of ours? No, hold on. Get out of here, you.
Well, it's funny because I was just talking with Tim Staples yesterday about how California, you can have 10 people gathered now. And I was like, that's like one person to come over to your house. You can have one person over because there's 9 of you.
I have a friend, Cy, who has, so they have 5 children. So they have a household of 7. And they've gone out to eat at restaurants in other states. And one of the rules is to prevent the pandemic and all that, is 6 to a table, and you can't combine tables.
Oh.
So it's like the rule to keep people from the pandemic apocalypse or whatever is you have maximum 6 at a table, and you're not allowed to combine tables. So she said, well, what do? We have 7. They said you could have one of the kids sit on your lap because we can't bring over extra chairs. And I'm like, how's
that helping?
This is what happens when you try to get bureaucracy to manage everything instead of providing helpful guidance and trusting individuals, which is something that I advocate for in my book, Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? The answer is no. Here's why.
Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? Trent's latest book. He's also the author of. Look, see how I'm helping you out now.
You did.
He's
that
also
was great.
the author of Why We're Catholic, Answering Atheism, Persuasive Pro-Life, and a very fine book that I will never tease him about again. What the Saints Never Said.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Also, I'm the host of the Council of Trent podcast, and we have a new podcast that just came out yesterday. I would highly recommend people go and check it out. You can listen to it for free on iTunes podcast app or Google Play or at Catholic.com. The podcast is called The Council of Trent, COUNSEL. I did a podcast called Racism, Riots, and a Catholic Response.
Oh, okay.
So I did a very timely episode talking about issues related to racism, the death of George Floyd, protests, violent demonstrations, riots, looting, and what our Catholic response should be to that. And this really hit home for me, Cy, because over the weekend on Saturday, there was a protest that devolved into a violent riot in La Mesa, which is only just a mile. What happened?
Oh, yeah,
Well,
right.
well, there were the grocery store that was looted, the banks that were burnt to the ground,
Yeah.
the Play It Again sports store that was just eviscerated. That all happened about a mile away from my home. And I was sitting up late. My family went to bed, and I was just staying up wondering what's going on, looking at the live stream, and then making sure this didn't bleed into my neighborhood. And so
Wow.
that prompted me to want to put forward a podcast that balanced many of the emotions I and other people felt, both at what happened to the death of George Floyd, what's going on with these protests, and also interjecting it with clear factual analysis and always keeping everything at the gospel at the center of our response. So that podcast
Yeah.
episode is called Racism, Riots, and a Catholic Response. And you can check it all out for free at the Council of Trent podcast.
Very good. I'm glad you did that. I don't think we can stop continually saying, look, racism is a sin. It's sinful to carry it in our hearts. And I think it actually, in times like these, people are more tempted to it than in more peaceful time. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But you just got to you have to fight. It's like if you have a temptation in that direction, you have to fight it. Just like if you have a temptation to sexual sin, or if you have a temptation to sin with money, or you have to fight that.
What
in
I
your heart.
said when this was happening, I remember I put on social media, I said that the death of George Floyd, and not the peaceful protests, but those who have devolved into straight up looting and violence against innocent people and property. Both the killing of George Floyd and violent looting against people and property exemplify the same part of our fallen sinful nature, which is this: we will hurt others to get what we want if we think there will not be consequences.
Right.
That is human nature. That is fallen human nature. Fallen human nature is clear that we are all one step away from that. And that's why a life of grace is so important. And ultimately, we need Jesus Christ to cure that fallen and sinful element. Do we need to fix structural sins in society, or things like unjust laws that allow sin to continue? Of course. That's why I've always advocated for making abortion illegal, for example. And it was good when slavery was outlawed, when racist laws were repealed in 1964. But merely changing society will not change people's hearts. And the only thing that can change people's hearts is the love of Jesus Christ.
Praise God. And we do love him, and he does love us. And all is well. We will recover from this as well. But we got to fight that, the sins in our own hearts. We got to fight and fight and fight. 888-318-7884 is the number, 888-31-TRUTH. It's tips for defending the faith today. Colby is first, calling from Washington State. Hello, Colby.
Hello. So I have a question insofar as I get into a lot of discussions with my friends, and I know that the Catholic faith has the fullness of the truth, but sometimes even when I present arguments to people, they ultimately reject them. And a lot of times it feels like it's on kind of flimsy grounds, and it frustrates me. And so I guess I don't know when to just let things lie and how to cope with that, because I believe that there are souls at stake here. So how can I reconcile that?
Yeah, I think, Colby, in our conversations, this is true both online and offline in the real world. It is the real world. And I think our conversations about the faith should take place person to person as much as possible. If you had a video chat because of the pandemic, fine. But I find conversations on social media to be 99% of the time unproductive. So Colby, are you speaking more primarily about like in-person interactions?
Yeah, it's usually in person, and they're usually with good friends of mine as well.
Sure. And I think that the question is, it's a great one. People ask me a lot. How do I know when to let the conversation go? And I think what we always have to have in our mindset is that the conversation doesn't have to go or end. It just needs to pause. So you should ask yourself, when should I pause this conversation? Because you could always resume it at another time, and you should leave the door open for that person to want to resume it. Because ultimately, we're never going to convince somebody in a single conversation of anything of great importance. If you can convince someone of something in a single conversation, it's possible you could evangelize someone, and in one brief conversation, they turn their life around. But usually, it's a process to change someone's entire worldview. Takes many, many conversations. So we have to think of conversations as like one pearl on the necklace, and we're always adding pearls to the strand, and we want to loop it together. So we have to think to ourselves, not when am I going to end this, but when do I pause it? And the time to pause a conversation is when you can tell that the other person is exasperated or tired, or they're making cues like they don't want to be there anymore. And that's why I find it's helpful in conversations to ask questions more than making statements like, so what do you think of this? Or what would you say to that? But a lot of times, Colby, especially, it's not what they say. The guide to tell when to pause the conversation, I would say 80% of the time is going to be nonverbal. The person's going to be crossing their arms. They're going to be looking away a lot, checking their phone a lot. They're going to sit and look squirming or in an uncomfortable position, or they'll try to change the subject. It's going to be hard to keep that person engaged. So we have to. It's an art to learn to see. Okay, when are they done right now, and they just need a break. It might not even be that it's animosity. It's just psychically they're bearing a lot that they're thinking about, and they need a break to process it. So we should just be gracious and say, hey, something to think about. But hey, if you ever want to talk about it again, love to chat with you about it. Just let me know. And I think if we look at it as a series of conversations, we pause rather than one that we end. It is just easier to have those talks with people. So does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much, and thanks for your ministry. It's very inspirational.
Well, thank you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Colby. I find you inspirational too, Trent.
Well, thank you, Si. I
This is
appreciate
part of
that.
my habit of just saying positive things to you and about you. And I'm going to keep that up. I'm not going to change that habit because that's how I feel about you.
All right.
888-318-7884 is our number. It's Tips for Defending the Faith with Trent Horn this hour. And if you would like tips on defending the faith, maybe you run into a particular snag, something that someone says that you don't know how to work through that. You have a particularly difficult person who you'd like to defend the faith to, a situation that's difficult, or you just like something more general, like our caller there, about how to make a good judgment about when to continue, when to take a break, and when to end a conversation. 888-318-7884. I want to ask you to consider, again, the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics. So many new classes coming out, so much good stuff. Trent's got a new class, Evidence for Catholic Moral Teaching, What the Church Teaches on Right and Wrong. It's the second course, and it's doing quite well. Lots of folks taking that course, and you can get it for $30 off if you sign up right now at schoolofapologetics.com. What do you cover in that one, Trent?
Well, we cover a lot of things. We cover life issues like abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide. We also cover foundational moral issues, moral philosophy, moral theology, conscience, free will. So we have the foundational elements, and then we apply them to moral issues, like issues related to life, abortion, embryonic stem cell research, physician-assisted suicide, euthanasia. We also cover issues related to chastity, so contraception, homosexuality, transgender, divorce, pornography. Then we also cover other social issues, so even things like religious freedom, environmentalism, and even economics like socialism. All that and more in my course, Evidence for Catholic Moral Teaching, to give you the tips to have productive conversations with people on these. Because a lot of times people who disagree with the church, it's usually the moral issues they disagree with primarily. I find 9 times out of 10, if they have a grievance against the Catholic Church's teachings, it's usually a moral issue. So it's important for us to be able to defend those.
You can go to schoolofapologetics.com to sign up. Schoolofapologetics.com. It's one of the. I think I'm really glad that you guys did the moral issues second, and so early in the course, because these are actually the major obstacles for many people.
They are.
Is the moral teachings of the church. So schoolofapologetics.com.
This is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Thank you for listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Is prayer powerful? St. Alphonsus Liguori put it this way: he who prays will be saved. He who does not pray, well, you get the point. Prayer can bring us salvation. It's the means of putting us into communion with God, and God can do all things. The more our will lines up with the will of God, the more powerful our prayers, and the simpler they become ultimately. Be it done to me, Lord, according to thy word. That's the prayer God will always answer.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Trent Horn in studio with us right now, and we're doing tips on defending the faith. So if you'd like some tips on defending your Christianity, your belief in God, your Catholic faith, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Let's go to Melissa in Orange County watching on YouTube. I was going to say YouTube Live, but it's just called YouTube. Sorry. Melissa, your question.
Hi, Trent.
Hi.
I'm a psychology student in college, and sometimes when the topic of religion comes up, I notice that people try to belittle it by saying that religion is kind of a bunch of nonsense that can be explained by psychology principles, such as like the confirmation bias and stuff like that. What would you say to skeptics like that?
Well, what I would say is that, Melissa, these kinds of objections, that they're very vague. And because they're vague, they can form a kind of universal acid that eats away at everything. So sometimes when people criticize the Catholic faith, you should ask yourself, okay, would this argument refute something else besides Catholicism? And if it ends up refuting everything, then it actually refutes nothing because it's so vague. So if the argument is religion is false because human beings have confirmation bias, by which, and what that means is we're more likely to believe data that supports what we already believe and ignore evidence that disconfirms what we already believe. So confirmation bias just means you're more willing to click on a link on the internet that supports what you believe, and you're going to pass over the link that refutes what you believe. We accumulate data that supports what we already believe. So, and I'm sure your classmates may have other objections, but if it's rooted in this, I could make a parallel argument. I could say, well, atheism is a product of confirmation bias. Many atheists, I'll talk to atheists here all the time on radio, and I'll ask them, what is the strongest argument for the existence of God? And they'll say things like, there is no strongest argument, or they're all equally bad, right? And they can't even give me a coherent argument because they've passed over the strongest case. They've disconfirmed it for themselves. So, even there, whether you're religious, atheist, human beings have these different psychological biases, but that doesn't mean that just because we have psychological biases that what we believe is false. We all have biases. The question is not whether we as humans have biases. We all have that. The question is, does the evidence support the conclusions that we hold? Because you can examine evidence for something and get past your bias to do that. And so I would just say to them, look, there might be these psychological tendencies we have, but that doesn't take away from the evidence. Because if it was just these biases, then that would undermine atheism. It would undermine other ethical beliefs, other political beliefs. We should look at the evidence, not the fact that there are universal biases among human beings. So that might be one way I would go at it. Is that a helpful response, or are there other things that they brought up you'd like me to address?
Well, it's kind of like along similar lines. Like
Sure.
if I explain like the miracles of prayer, they might say, "Oh, your supposed answer that you got from prayer was really just a coincidence," or like we said, confirmation bias. But obviously, psychology can't explain miracles.
Right. And what I would say here is this actually brings up a good point, Melissa, that some evidence we would put forward to skeptics is not going to be compelling, and we should avoid it. So, for example, if I prayed, Lord, please help me to be able to pay my rent this month, and then I got a unexpected tax return from the government, like, hey, you accidentally overpaid, by $500. And it's like, oh man, it'll pay my rent. See, this is evidence for God. A skeptic would rightly point out something like the law of large numbers, that in a country, for example, with 330 million people, there's going to be lots of people asking God for help with rent. And there's going to be lots of opportunities where unexpected windfalls will come. So among hundreds of millions of people, you'll have fortuitous coincidences are bound to happen. So your classmates are right to reject that kind of evidence, But that wouldn't work for things that are legitimate miracles, like hundreds of people in Fatima seeing the sun dancing in the sky, and even having newspaper reports contemporaneous at that time describing puddles drying up and clothes drying up because of it. So it's not a mere optical phenomena. It wouldn't explain a group of dejected apostles coming to believe their rabbi had risen from the dead, even though their entire culture had conditioned them to believe an executed Messiah was a failed Messiah. It wouldn't explain why the disciples came to believe Jesus rose from the dead and found his tomb to be empty. So I think that these elements, these psychological explanations, they can refute weak evidence for the faith, but not strong evidence for the faith. Actually, Melissa, if you stay on the line, I'll send you a copy of my book, Answering Atheism, because I have a whole chapter in there, and I mention arguments against the existence of God that rely on psychology. And one of those arguments is that, look, we can because your friends may say this too in psychology, we can reproduce the feelings in your brain that you get in prayer that can be reproduced in a lab. So therefore, you're not really praying to anyone. But that's a bad argument, because the feelings I get in my brain when I look here in the studio and I see Cy Kellett, that could be re-stimulated in my brain to give me a hallucination that's not real. But
Wouldn't
it doesn't
that be nice, though, if when I wasn't there, you could get little visions of me? That would be really nice.
Well, yeah, because I do enjoy your company, Cy. It is quite pleasant.
Yeah.
Even when you playfully rib me, that is okay, listeners.
Nope,
it's
I
quite
don't do that
nope,
anymore.
It's quite all right.
Nope.
So, so stay on the line. We'll send you that. But yeah. So is that helpful?
Yes, so much. Thank you.
All right, no problem.
Thank you, Melissa. Call again sometime. 888-318-7884 is the number. It's Tips for Defending the Faith this hour with our good friend and a mighty apologist, Trent Horn. Let's go to Gabriel in Massachusetts, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Gabriel, thank you for downloading the app onto your phone. Your question for Trent.
Well, you're very welcome. Thanks for taking my call. So I'm a teenager and a high school student, and I'm at like a point in my life where a lot of my friends are starting to lose respect for their religion. A lot of them are brought up Catholic, but many have already stopped going to church, and I think a lot of them, like as soon as their parents stop making them go to church, that they're going to stop going.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, what could I do to try and help persuade my friends that religion is important and that it's important to go to church?
Yeah. Well, Gabriel, what I would say is to help your friends to see religion as important, I would really recommend being a beacon of hope and a model of the Christian faith to them, for them to be able to see that. In 1 Corinthians 11:1, St. Paul says, "Be imitators of me as I am of Christ." Now, I wish that I could say that to people on a regular basis, but I always feel like, oh man, I'm really slacking off in different areas. But just imagine that is the goal for us as Christians. And it's a hard goal, but it's one the saints have shown by cooperating with God's grace we can get to. That through a deep prayer life, through a life of receiving the sacraments, through a life of practicing virtue, we can imitate Christ to such an extent that we can tell people, like St. Paul did in 1 Corinthians 11:1, "Be imitators of me as I am of Christ." And so when we do that, people will naturally see the importance of religion, and they will start to see that our life is different. I remember, Gabriel, it's actually interesting, during my conversion, after my conversion in high school. So I became Catholic when I was a junior in high school. And after that, I had two groups of friends, and I never let the two meet, because I had a non-Catholic group that had a more eccentric, kind of dark sense of humor that I worried would scandalize my Catholic friends. And my Catholic friends, they would even complain, like, don't you keep all your friends separated, like when you go to a cafeteria and you have the plate of food and there's the different compartments you put it in. They always felt like the carrots placed in one compartment, and my non-Catholic friends were the gelatin placed in the other. I kept them apart. And eventually they came together. My point is, with my non-Catholic friends, I would be an example to them. I would share my faith with them, but I wasn't like preaching down their throats or anything. But they would say things to me like, Trent, we don't always agree with what you believe, but it's a good thing. They would say, like, I appreciate, Trent, that you're always there for us. You keep people in our group from doing dumb things that might hurt other people. And so when people see that you, Gabriel, when people see virtues in you, like the fruits of the Spirit, love, peace, patience, gentleness, and kindness, and then they see that in you, and then you graciously invite them to take part in things that you find joy in, like going to mass, or you can choose other activities that maybe your more lukewarm Catholic high school friends would be interested in, like going to seeing a good Catholic musician, or going to a youth night at a parish where they're doing something fun and people can just hang out. So I'd say be that example, and then invite them to mass or confession. And if they're not willing to go to that, try to find some other kind of activity with other good Catholics there, like a youth group. That's just a fun thing to do, and they can see there's other Catholics that live out their faith that are cool, normal, healthy people. So I hope that's helpful for you, Gabriel, and feel free to call back at any time.
Thanks, Gabriel. Trent Horn is our guest. Tips for defending the faith this hour. Lots of folks on the line, but you can there's one line open, 888-318-7884. We'll do our very best to get you on when we come back with Trent Horn, Tips for Defending the Faith on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
Why is it wrong to help someone commit suicide? Don't people have a right to die with dignity rather than being a burden to others? Does the Church teach that the terminally ill must be kept alive by machines for as long as possible? In 20 Answers, End-of-Life Issues, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, helping you unravel the controversies and confusions surrounding euthanasia, assisted suicide, and the rights of patients in our uncertain healthcare future. 20 Answers, End-of-Life Issues is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Many Catholics ignore the Bible. They say they have the Church instead. But we should embrace sacred Scripture, not just as the revealed Word of God, but as a Catholic work, intimately connected with the Church from the earliest centuries. In The Bible is a Catholic Book, apologist Jimmy Akin shows how the Bible cannot exist apart from the Church, in its origins, in the truths it contains, in its careful preservation over the centuries. Scripture is inseparable from the Catholic faith. This is fitting, since both come from God for our salvation. If you're a Catholic who sometimes gets intimidated by the Bible is a Catholic Book will help you better understand and take pride in this gift that God gave the world through the Church. After all, Catholics are the original Bible Christians. Order your copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book today by calling 1-844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Keller, your host. Trent Horn, our guest this hour. And we're doing tips on defending the faith. So if you'd like a tip or some tips for defending your faith, 888-318-7884, the number. We go now to Noah in Orange County, watching on Catholic.com. Hi, Noah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for everything you guys do. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
First time calling here. I usually speak to Patrick Madrid, Relevant Radio, but I know that's where he came from you guys as well.
I know. We haven't seen Patrick in a long. I don't know what's up with Patrick. You just reminded me. I don't know what he's up to. Well, I know he's up to a million things. That's what he's up to. That's what Patrick does. Patrick's a very, very busy person. But yeah, you're right. We haven't had him on for a while. But go ahead with your question for Trent.
Yeah. My question is, what's the best way to explain these riots and stuff with the looting and everything when Jesus came to the temple and overturned tables, grabbed the cord, chasing people out? How can we separate?
So is your question, some people say, well...
How can we understand it?
Right. So are you saying that some people say that because Jesus tipped over the tables of the money changers and engaged in violence against them. It just says he made a whip of cords and drew them out. It doesn't say that he inflicted violence on their persons per se, but he may have. He certainly inflicted violence on their tables. He might have broken certain things and driving them out of the temple. Is the question that because Jesus flipped over the tables of the money changers and drove them out, that because Jesus did that, why can't people engage in riots and looting today if Jesus started a little riot in the temple 2,000 years ago? Is that kind of the nut of the objection?
Yeah, sort of, because what I encountered on Facebook, a family member posted a picture of a painting of Jesus flipping a table.
Mm-hmm.
And, she's all, here's for my religious folks, kind of expressing what's happening right now. She's kind of she doesn't read the Bible and stuff like that.
Right, but and I would say this is a bad argument, saying, here, Jesus destroyed property here, therefore it's always okay to destroy property, including in the looting that is taking place during these protests related to the killing of George Floyd. That's a bad argument. That would be like saying, well, here's a police officer who killed George Floyd, and I know there hasn't been a trial yet, but let's just assume, for the sake of the argument, that was an unlawful, unjustified killing, and for all intents and purposes, it appears to be an unjustified use of force that led to manslaughter and the unjustified death of another human being. It'd be like saying, well, look, here is a picture of a soldier killing someone in wartime, so therefore this police officer could kill someone. Just because killing is okay in some contexts doesn't mean it's okay in all contexts. Likewise, just because destroying property is okay in some contexts, it doesn't mean it's okay in all contexts. So I would say, well, what are the differences between Jesus driving out the money changers and the looting that is going on in these in the riots that have happened? These are, when looting occurs, we don't have a peaceful protest anymore. We have a riot. What's the difference? Number one, the reason that Jesus overturned the tables and drove out the money changers was because what they were doing was wrong. They should not have been turning a sacred place in the temple into a place of commercial activity. Notice that Jesus did not go outside of the temple and then continue to tear apart the many shops that were in Jerusalem. He didn't do that. He just said, it's wrong for you to be doing this here in my Father's house. So if anything, Jesus was defending his own property against people who were unlawfully there. So when people bring up that example of Jesus turning over the tables, it doesn't correspond with the looters. It would correspond more with property owners using force to repel those who are unlawfully there. So actually, the argument of Jesus flipping over the tables does not support the looters. It supports the right of shop owners to use proportionate force to defend their property from people who are unlawfully there and are violating that space. So Jesus was defending his Father's house and the space that was being violated. He didn't go out and just, in a righteous anger, attack innocent businesses in Jerusalem or traders or merchants that had nothing to do with what was going on. Also, another point, Jesus didn't take the money from the money changers and keep it and then run off and do whatever he darn well pleased with it. The looters are taking property and keeping it to enrich themselves. So I would say it really does annoy me when people will see this activity and try to condone all of this violence against innocent people by saying these are individuals who are just aggrieved about racial injustice. And that's not true. I've seen interviews with people, with looters who've been arrested, who said they barely heard about the killing of George Floyd and they just wanted to get free money. They wanted stuff. A lot of these people, I think, are criminals. They're people who normally would operate as criminals in the dark secretly and have now had a chance to come to the light. I mean, everyone condemns what's going on with the looting. It amazes me there are some people who still won't condemn this. It's condemned by the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's condemned by George Floyd's family. It's been condemned by political figures who are sympathetic to this. Everyone realizes you ought to peacefully protest against police brutality and against racism. That is obvious. But that nothing justifies looting and destroying the livelihoods of stores, many of which in these instances are stores that are owned by persons of color who are already members of marginalized communities. So it really does confound me a bit. But is that a helpful reply, Noah?
That's very helpful. I pretty much answered that. already towards her post. But at the end, she just said, well, my point is that he was angry.
Right. And you could say to her, does being angry mean it's always okay to hurt other people? No, of course not. Being angry, you could say, yeah, it's okay for Jesus to tell people, get out of my Father's house with your sacrilegious practices. And so it's okay to be angry. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, in his letter to the Ephesians, he says, be angry, but don't let the sun set on your anger. So it's okay to be angry, to have a righteous anger, but it's not okay to fall into the sin of anger and vengeance and go out and hurt innocent people. And that just can't be justified. And you could say to her, would it be, who were you speaking with about this? Did you say it was a relative?
Yes, correct.
Okay, you could ask her, would it be okay for someone, because they're angry about the killing of George Floyd, would it be okay for them to break into your house and take your stuff and hurt or kill you? Obviously, if it would be wrong, if you would be outraged at them doing that to you, you should be outraged at them doing that to other people. So I would just recommend saying that to them. And also, I recommend my new podcast episode that just came out. Just go to TrentHornPodcast.com, though you can listen to it for free at iTunes, Google Play. Just search for the Council of Trent, COUNSEL, and just go to the most recent episode that's come out. It's called Racism, Riots, and a Catholic Response. You can get it at Council of Trent on iTunes app, or it's available at Catholic.com as well.
Thanks, Noah. 888-318-7884, our number, 888-31-TRUTH. Up next from Wichita, Kansas, is Nash. Nash, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm right here.
Hello, Nash. How old are you?
I am 8 years old.
Well, you speak very well, Nash. What is your question for Mr. Horn?
It was, where does the soul live in your body?
That's a good question, Nash. The soul does not live in a certain space because the soul is not made of matter. The soul is not like a little ghostly substance. It's not made of matter, so there's not a space in our body where our soul lives, but rather our soul is present throughout our whole body. The soul is just the principle of life. The soul is what makes the cells of our body that are living and work together to keep us alive. The soul is what makes us a living body rather than a dead body. So the soul is what animates our whole body. It's present in our whole being. In fact, it's present in every living thing. That makes it a living thing rather than a dead thing. And so it's present in our body, though if our bodies are damaged so that our life can no longer be sustained, then the soul leaves the body. So it's present in the whole body while our bodies are alive, but then upon death, the soul leaves the body, and where we wait with joyful hope to be reunited with our bodies, our glorious resurrected bodies, at the resurrection of the dead. So is that helpful?
Yes.
All right.
Very helpful.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for calling in.
Wow, you're really good at this. Like, I have to say, Nash, you're a better caller. I'm not saying this to insult our adult callers, but you're better than all of them. You're better than 100% of our adult callers. So you did a really good job.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Is there any chance that maybe you could get like a popsicle or some pudding for a reward? Is there anyone there that could do that for you?
Mom says yes.
Nice going, Mom. All right, we'll take a break. Enjoy your popsicle or your pudding, Nash. We'll be right back with more Trent Horn, tips for defending the faith.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
I want to talk to you about the importance of bringing the news to you every day. And we do that two ways on Catholic Connection. Firstly, we give you a newscast that I write and give to you to keep you up to date on what's happening in the world, in the church. And then we also do interviews daily to help you understand everything from a truly Catholic perspective.
Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Tomorrow morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Trent Horn is our guest. If you're good and you do a good call, you can have a popsicle or some pudding. 888-318-7884. Up next is Dan in Kirksville, Missouri, listening on Covenant Radio there in Missouri. Hang on, Dan. Let me push the right button here. All right, Dan, go ahead. Your question for Trent.
Yes, hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Happy to.
I have a suggestion. First, I'm reading Will to Love, Reflections for Daily Living by St. Maximilian Kolbe, Prophet of the Civilization of Love. It's very helpful. I encourage you to read that. My question is on racism and the abortion business. Why aren't these two topics ever brought together? I have some information on Minnesota from Paul at NCCL. The Black American population in Minnesota is 8%. They have 26% of the abortions.
Right.
This is figures from 2018. 2,625 babies were killed. That works out to be about 7 babies a day.
Right.
Burned to death, poisoned to death, they're cut up into pieces.
Right.
Why aren't these topics brought together as when we discuss racism?
Well, actually, I'm familiar with a fair number of pro-life advocates who talk about abortion as a kind of like black genocide. I think Georgia Right to Life actually had a whole page on that. I've known a lot of pro-life advocates who have noted the disparities, saying that African Americans make up a disproportionate number of women who choose abortion, far greater than the number of African Americans that represent the population as a whole. So there may be, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there are racist elements there among those who provide abortions. That wouldn't surprise me. Margaret Sanger, who helped to spearhead what would later become Planned Parenthood, was a notorious eugenicist. She started a paper that the Birth Control Review, whose goal was to create a master race of thoroughbreds. So she practiced eugenics. So there's a lot that was tied up in that movement. Though another way to explain it might just be that there are women who are poor often choose abortion, and there are lots of women who live below the poverty line or live under a certain income threshold. And there's just a higher proportion of women under that income threshold who are African American, for example, that there are more African Americans who are in poverty than maybe other races. And if people who are in poverty in large numbers choose abortion, then the overrepresentation there may not be due. It could be due to racism from policies that drive people into poverty, at least indirectly. So it may just be the fact that African Americans make up a greater share of women who are likely to choose abortion. Though it wouldn't surprise me, however, if there are individuals within the pro-abortion movement who harbor racist feelings and strategically advertise and place abortion facilities to reach this particular demographic. So for more on that, I would definitely recommend check out some pro-life groups that have information on that. It's well worth to look into, that's for sure.
Again, it's tips for defending the faith. Dan, thanks very much for the call. We go now to Ryan in New Braunfels, Texas, watching on YouTube Live. Ryan, your question for Trent Horn.
Hey, guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Not as well as we could hear that kid that
yes.
called earlier, but we can hear you really well.
Well, I can't compete with her. I mean, she's very articulate. But, yes, quick question for you guys regarding church authority. My wife and I are in our CIA and in the process of joining the church.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some questions from Protestant friends and family, specifically regarding church authority, that
right.
if you have a church of human, fallible individuals, how could a church effectively protect that deposit of faith and administer sacraments and forgive sin? Would a priest, for example, be able to on their own just decline to forgive sin or same for a bishop or pope. So again, that's kind of the line of reasoning they're using, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on a good counter there.
Okay, yeah. So I guess, Ryan, and this is similar to Melissa, another caller I brought up earlier, when people make objections to the Catholic faith, you should ask, does this argument kind of boomerang back at them or create a universal acid that refutes everything in its path? So if it refutes everything, then it's probably just an overbroad objection, or it's one that's not completely valid. So the claim here seems to be that if the Catholic Church is composed of human elements, human beings lead it, and human beings are fallible, so they could fail, does that mean that the church could then fail in its mission to save souls or to protect the deposit of faith? Well, by that logic, I would say that could also apply then to the Bible. This is actually the same argument that atheists use against the Bible. That atheists will say, look, human beings are fallible. They could have made a mistake when they were writing the Bible. They could have made a mistake when they are copying the Bible, when they are compiling the Bible. So if that's the case, how can we trust the Bible when human beings wrote it, copied it, and compiled it? Now, your Protestant friends would probably tell them, well, yes, humans did that, but they're guided by the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit protected them from introducing any errors into the text, and God providentially protected the Bible so it would be passed along to us today. So if they will allow that defense for the Bible, then I would allow that. Then you should say, why can't that same defense be applied to the church so that the church is protected? And you should also make clear what the church is and is not protected against. It's not protected against leaders of the church committing sins, even grave sins. I mean, you could have a priest who denies someone the sacrament of confession without a good reason, and he would commit a sin by doing that, but God will not hold it against that person who's been denied the sacrament. And the church has a principle in church law that says, I forget the Latin phrase, but in English it's the church supplies. The church supplies graces when there's deficiencies in its ministers. So God will not hold it against someone if they sought out the sacrament of reconciliation and a priest unjustifiably kept it from them. Though what's interesting here is that a priest does have the right, the duty even, to withhold the sacrament of confession in some instances, such as, for example, if a person is not repentant. If they're just going through the motions and they even just say that to the priest may say, well, you're not repentant, so I'm not giving you the sacrament. And there is a biblical warrant for this in John 20:23. In John 20:23, Jesus tells the apostles, whose sins you forgive are forgiven, and whose sins you retain are retained. Isn't that interesting? So Jesus told the apostles they could retain sins, which means they had a good reason for doing that. So what I would say is that within the church, its ministers could commit grave sins. We're not protected against that. What we're protected against is the church formally binding the faithful through an act of the church as a whole or through the Pope, through a special ex cathedra declaration. The church is protected from binding the faithful to an error in faith or morals, to an error in theology and faith or morals, to heresy. So I would say that you could run at that. You should clarify what is protected against, that there will be deficient ministers, but there is no deficiency in the deposit of faith that's handed on and in the church's teachings. And then that if this argument does not refute the human elements in Protestantism, such as in the formation of the Bible, it does not refute the human elements in Catholicism. And that Catholicism goes further and better explains elements of Protestantism, such as how we can know the books of the Bible were compiled together in a correct way, that we actually have the church gave them to us, and we know that historically through the revelation of Christ, through the testimony of the early church fathers, and through that. So I would recommend that. Ryan, I'll happily send you a copy of my book, The Case for Catholicism, that goes into this deeper. But is that helpful so far?
No, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the canon. I was actually listening to a Reformed Protestant professor, Michael Kruger, who actually made the argument that we can know the true canon through it being self-authenticating by by the language of Scripture being majestic and beautiful and all of this. And it's funny, your response is spot on. I don't know how they can say that the church couldn't fulfill its mission through the Spirit, but then also claim that through the Spirit we can know the canon.
Yeah, and actually, Ryan, so stay on the line, give us your email address, because in chapter 4 of my book, The Case for Catholicism, I address Michael Kruger's arguments for the Protestant canon based on the self-authenticating criteria. One of the things I point out is that if a book is able to authenticate it's the Word of God because of its majesty and eloquence, then that means that the book of Numbers is out and Shakespeare is in. There's plenty of non-biblical works that are majestic and eloquent, and there's plenty of passages in the Bible that are not majestic and eloquent, but they're still the Word of God. So whenever Protestants try to come up with a criteria for the canon on its own that gives us and only gives us their 66 books, we know there's actually 73, 72, depending on how you count, it just doesn't work. And so I cover that in, I believe, chapter 4 of my book, The Case for Catholicism. Give us your email address, and I will happily get a copy to you. I'm sure you'll enjoy checking that out. So thanks for calling.
Thank you very much. Going to keep moving because we're getting close to the end of our time with Trent. It's tips for defending the faith. Second hour, Dr. Greg Popcak is going to be here, and it's a time of great anxiety. Dr. Popcak is a real pro, both on the theology of the Catholic Church and on the modern science of psychology. And if you'd like to talk about your anxiety, depression, or how to deal with those things in a Catholic, in a Christian way, in a compelling way with those who may be suffering around you, we'll be here the entire second hour to do that. Let's go to Al in Walton Beach, Florida, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Hi, Al. Got a question for Trent?
Hey, Mr. Horn, how are you?
I'm doing well, Al. Thank you for calling.
Hey, I was an avid reader. I love your books. I got a quote from C.S. Lewis where he said, "Ever since I served as an infantryman in the First World War, I have a great dislike for people who, themselves, in ease and safety, issue exhortations to men in the front line." Well, last week I heard a well-known Catholic apologist talk about how the atom bombs of World War II were sinful because, the mass. He was very historically inaccurate. And as a 5-time combat veteran,
right,
how do I address people like this who really don't understand combat and never been there? And when I took it personal because I've been in a lot of combat. And
sure.
When you go to do things for your country and overall you're saving lives in the long run, especially your shipmates' lives,
right.
I took really great offense to that. And I found it an ignorant statement. And I don't want to be mean or ugly, but how do you address people in, as they say, in love to
Right.
address something like
Sure.
this that,
well, I think, Al,
you know,
here's how I would address all of this. First, I would say it is important to affirm the valor of those who voluntarily choose to serve our country in the armed forces. It takes a lot of courage to do that. War is hell. Pope St. John Paul II said, "War, never again war. It is an ugly thing that we should never hope for, but always be prepared for." However, the Church teaches that when we fight wars, when we wage war and conflict, it should always be a just war. So it should always be something where it's a last resort. All peaceful options have been exhausted. There's a reasonable prospect of success. The means that we use to win the war don't create greater evils than that which we are fighting. And finally, we should be proportional in our response. So the problem is I agree with you in the sense that we should not trivialize the actions of veterans, those who fight in wars, and we should understand the complexities that are involved. But at the same time, the Church does teach that there are certain things in war that we cannot do. And one of those things is the indiscriminate killing of civilians. And I think that's a pretty bedrock principle. Like when it comes to the use of an atom bomb, I could see how using an atomic bomb would make sense. We don't really do it anymore because all hell would break loose if we did this. But, if you use the atom bomb to combat a naval fleet at sea and you were only targeting other members of the military. But it seems pretty clear to me that we should be really careful in saying, well, this military method is justified because it will save X number of lives in the future. To me, I'm really concerned about that. That sounds like consequentialism. Because there's certain things I think you and I would agree you should never do in war, even if it'll save more lives down the line. So, for example, would you agree you shouldn't bomb an elementary school or a hospital if you think it'll end a war sooner? Because that would be wrong. Would you agree with something like that? Well, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I always keep a hand on the clock here. Al, I do thank you for your service. I do appreciate that. If you stay on the line and give us your email address, I'll send you an article at Catholic.com that I think weighs the issue of the use of the atomic bomb in war in a balanced way. Stay on the line. Give us your email address. I'll send that to you. Thank you again for your service, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Al. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for that conversation, because that could be a very, very productive one. So if you want to call back again, that'll be fine sometime. When we've got more time, we'll discuss it more. Trent Horn, author of Why We're Catholic, and most recently, Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? Thanks for a really great hour.
Thanks for having me.
You're the greatest, Trent. You're the tip top.
You call me the mighty Trent Horn. If they ever make a cartoon about me, I want it to be called Trent Horn, the mighty apologist.
Okay. All right. Let's make a cartoon about it. Dr. Popcak coming in next. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I told you there was nothing to worry about. We've got a good show for Wednesday. I know sometimes you think we're just going to mail it in on a Wednesday, but no, we put together a good show for today, and this hour is no exception. It's a very strange time to be a human being. I do not know how it is for the rest of the animal kingdom, but for human beings, this is a very strange time. It's very stressful, several months to start the spring off, and then it got worse. Now we've got, in addition to a disease, we've got unrest and anarchy. It has a slight feeling of the four horsemen, one of which is pestilence and one of which is war. So I don't want to make light of it, but I also don't want to be too heavy about it with that reference to the book of Revelation. But I am... having a greater and greater sense that the sense of anxiety that people are experiencing has costs in itself, and they are spiritual and physical costs that people are paying. And so we have a wonderful guest this hour to help us talk through that. If you have questions, 888-318-7884 is our number, 888-318-7884. Our guest is Dr. Greg Popcak. He and his wife, Lisa, host the popular More to Life call-in program, where they actually provide a great deal of help to folks navigating the waters of family life. More to Life airs weekdays at 10 a.m. on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. You can also find Dr. Popcak at the organization he founded at CatholicCounselors.com. The author of more than 20 books, including Worried.
Unworried.
Oh, excuse me. That's how stressful this time is.
You used to be worried.
Yeah,
now
you're unworried.
Unworried.
Dr.
Yeah.
Greg Popcak, thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure, Cy. You forgot about Murder Hornets, by the way.
Oh, I did. I forgot the Murder Hornets.
You forgot that was just like a filler episode. It was like, a guest director came in, shot a couple of episodes of that, and then they moved out. We just didn't follow that story up at all.
Yeah, not all the plagues are of the same significance, but we seem to be getting all of them. What do you say? I mean, I think I have to say I see particularly young adults who maybe this is the first time around through really tough times. They're struggling. Quite a few I've talked to genuinely struggling with what is happening.
Well, I mean, this is kind of a first time around for all of us. For most of this, this is pretty unprecedented. But the reality is, these are scary times, and there's a lot going on in the world that's anxiety producing. The subtitle of the book, Unworried, is A Life Without Anxiety, and you could think, in the face of all of the things that are going on in the world, that's kind of a joke. How can you live a life without anxiety? One of the points I like to make right up front is that there's a difference between having a concern, and having anxiety.
Okay.
If you have a concern, you're able to identify the problem, gather your resources, identify support, and make a plan for addressing the thing that's in front of you. When you have anxiety, you just zero in on the problem and you say, oh my gosh, there's a problem. Oh my gosh, it's still there. I should do something about that problem, but I can't do anything about that problem. But I have to do something, but I can't do it. And then you just spin out. And that's the difference. The point isn't that we can only feel peaceful when the world is at peace or when our lives are at peace.
Right.
The point is that we have to shift from that attitude of anxiety where we're so focused in on the problem that we can't see that there are resources, we can't see that there's support, and we can't imagine a possible plan, and instead focus back in on our concerns that allow us to identify the problem and see it for what it is, but also be able to bring that problem to God, gather our resources, gather our support, and make a plan to address it.
If you'd like to talk about anxiety, and if you'd like to talk about a response to anxiety that is informed both by the latest science and by all that the Lord has given us in our Catholic tradition, Dr. Greg Popcak, a great person to talk to. And the number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Talking to one of my young adult children who has struggled actually with anxiety and depression, he told me, I'm not watching the news. He goes, I know that it'll just upset me. I don't, it's not worth me taking that risk. What do you think of that strategy?
No, actually, that's actually a perfectly valid point to take, or tack to take. I think that we all need to identify how much input we can really handle. And the fact is, there didn't always used to be a 24-hour news cycle. I know for most people's lives it has been, but there doesn't need to be a 24-hour news cycle in your life.
Yeah.
It's fine to check in periodically, see what's going on, see what the local news says you need to be concerned about, and then turn it off because you can get on with your life. So, there are some people who enjoy the news and who find it, useful to check in like that. But for most people don't need to do that. And in fact, for many people, it's detrimental to their mental health.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. 888-318-7884, the number. Social media, too, I imagine, which is kind of an amplifier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I turned on just to see what was going on, CNN, the other night, and the reporter is saying, it was in New York City, the police are just decimating this crowd. I thought, decimating? That means literally killing every 10th person. There's no way that they're decimating this crowd. But I mean, but you get that language. You get this very excited language.
Yeah, well, exactly, and like I was alluding to the idea of a 24-hour news cycle. You've got to keep up the energy. You've got to keep up the drama in order to generate ratings and
Right.
viewers.
Right.
And so that's why I'm saying you don't personally need to have a 24-hour news cycle in your life. It's enough to check into the news once a day, every other day, and even just strictly limit yourself to local news to figure out how this is directly affecting you and what you need to do. You don't need to be plugged in that much. It doesn't matter to you on that level. And so being able to set up appropriate boundaries for yourself that let you know how much of that input you can take is a perfectly appropriate response. In fact, when the pandemic first struck, the APA, the American Psychological Association, came out with recommendations for what they were calling COVID stress syndrome. And one of the things was stepping back from the news media and social media if you found that when you spent any time on there, it was ratcheting up your anxiety levels.
Again, 888-318-7884, the number. We'll go to callers very shortly. We just have two lines open right now. 888-318-7884. Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest. Let us go to our faith then, because I actually have heard several people say things along the lines of, I'm having trouble praying. And you would think, I want to respond to this with prayer, but somehow the ratcheting up of anxiety is actually interfering even with the thing that might address the anxiety.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think that, in order to pray, a lot of times we need to learn how to quiet ourselves, right? And anxiety makes us feel anything but quiet. And so often we feel like we can't pray because we can't get ourselves to that place where our mind stops spinning. What I'd say to somebody who's in that position is to use that in their prayer. To not just think that they can only pray when they can be perfectly quiet, but to bring that anxiety to God, to say, Lord, my mind is spinning. I can't get my head to stop, kind of going over these things and working through these different concerns that I have. I just ask you to bring that peace into this situation and help me respond to all the things in my life in a way that glorifies you and helps me be the person you want me to be in the face of it, right? So you don't have to get yourself to a place where you can be perfectly calm. God wants you to bring all the stuff to him, even the messy stuff, right? And that's the whole point of prayer, is to let him help you make sense out of it all, as opposed to coming to him already calm, already peaceful, already put together, and say, look at me, Lord, how wonderful I am. I'm presenting myself to you now.
Right. That is that is an actual handicap to prayer, to think I got to get it together so I can pray. Or even the other distractions. You use other distractions when, because sometimes people will say, well, gosh, I can't pray because that baby is crying, or I can't pray because that noise is in the background. Pray for that baby. Pray for the person driving that truck that's making all that noise in the background. Pray for the Holy Spirit is bringing those things into your attention, and you can incorporate that into your prayer life to bring God into what's going on right there in that moment. And the more you do that, the more God actually allows you to find peace in the middle of all the crazy, instead of treating prayer like it has to be your escape from that. See, that's why we have Dr. Popcak on. And we've got a bunch of folks on the line. We have to take a quick break, and then we'll get right to your questions for Dr. Greg Popcak right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Dale Ahlquist of the American Chesterton Society, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Father Robert Spitzer.
First of all, you will get a much deeper awareness of your faith, much deeper awareness of the evidence for your faith, explanations of tough theological issues, how science and reason and faith come together, and above all, a deeper awareness of how to practice your faith and how to live it.
Father Spitzer's Universe with Father Robert Spitzer. Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Dr. Greg Popcak, a good man to talk to in trying times. These are trying times, and you're welcome to talk to him. 888-318-7884. We'll start out with Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, actually, watching on Facebook Live. Hope all is well there in Minnesota. Thomas, your question for Dr. Popcak. Thomas?
Hello?
Hi, Thomas.
Well, I can barely hear you. I think this connection is a little spotty. Hi. So, it was just basically that I struggle with hope. I don't struggle with hope, but I struggle with despair sometimes, and I have moments of both. And I think that's related to, well, I don't know how to put it, really. I mean, sometimes I'm sure I'm saved, and other times I'm sure I'm damned, and I was just wondering.
Oh, you go vacillating between the hope of salvation and the despair that you are not saved, Thomas. Okay. Dr. Greg?
Well, and Thomas, I'm sorry, it says on the board here that you're struggling with paranoid schizophrenia. Is that sort of the root problem there?
Well, it's not, that's what I was diagnosed with, yes, but, I'm not sure that that's true. It's just, I'm not sure.
Okay, and are you on medication at this point for that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and are you in counseling as well? You see somebody regularly?
Yes, I was baptized and confirmed into the church. I went to Catholic grade school for 12.
Oh, sorry, Thomas. I said counseling. Are you in counseling?
I'm sorry?
Are you in counseling as well as on medication?
No, I'm not in counseling.
Okay, that's going to be really important because even though schizophrenia is largely a biochemical disease of the nervous system, being able to have good cognitive behavioral therapy enables you to start sorting through those thoughts in a more systematic way so that you can avoid those extremes. What you're talking about here is vacillating between, this extreme feeling that you're damned or that extreme feeling that everything's fine, instead of being able to look at that more realistically. That's called polarized thinking. And polarized thinking is one of those it's called a cognitive distortion. It's a bad thinking habit that has you seeing everything in very black and white terms. Now, that's a common problem for somebody who's struggling with paranoid schizophrenia, but working with a cognitive behavior therapist in addition to the psychiatrist who's prescribing medication for you is going to help you begin to not just think in those black and white terms, but be able to see the gray, to be able to recognize that, yes, we're broken and yes, we're sinful, but God's mercy is infinitely greater, and that you can rest in that mercy. And a simple practice, for example, that St. Ignatius of Loyola recommended was that when we are feeling that sense of condemnation, to begin by rooting ourselves in God's love and mercy. So actually sitting down with a notebook and writing down the times that you have felt God's love, writing down even the things that God did today to show you that he loves you. And if you're saying, well, gosh, I don't think God did anything to show me that he loves me. If anything went right in your day, that was God showing you that he loved you. Because the reality is, in a sinful, broken world, nothing is supposed to go right. And so anything that does go well, that is God saying, Thomas, I love you. And it's good to write those things down and praise God for them. The more we're able to experience that sense of gratitude, the more we're able to increase that peace that comes from living in that grace. And so even though you're struggling with a chronic illness and you need to stay on your medication, I would really encourage you to get hooked up with a good cognitive behavior therapist. Talk to your psychiatrist about that, because you're going to need ongoing support to maintain that balance instead of giving into those polarized thoughts that you're just struggling with right now. So that's your next step.
God bless you, Thomas. Many people praying for you, I'm sure, now, having heard your call. Thank you for the call. We're talking about the anxiety of the moment and dealing with anxiety from a perspective both of science and faith with Dr. Greg Popcak. 888-318-7884. The number. Rita in New Jersey, listening on the EWTN app. You are next. Rita, your question for Dr. Popcak.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. I had a concern that as of a few hours has turned into an anxiety. I made reservations to visit my grandkids in another state before the pandemic, and when one kid I canceled, and then I prayerfully discerned it was okay to go, so I renewed the reservations. And I'm flying out tomorrow, and I'm tracking, and I'm getting more anxious because of the riots. Really,
oh, okay, Rita. It's just I don't know what's happening with our call quality, but it's not very good. So I'm just going to encapsulate that. You're flying tomorrow to see the grandkids. You had your anxiety about the disease controlled, but now we've got the riots. Did you want Dr. Popcak to respond with some ideas about dealing with this? I mean, multiple causes of anxiety. Is that about flying tomorrow? Is that what you're looking for, Rita, or was it something else?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you, Rita.
So is it possible for me to ask a follow-up? Is she still there? I know the quality is not great, but let me ask you. So Rita, when you think about these different things, the virus, about the rioting, what about that? I mean, you might say, well, gosh, that's certainly enough to be upset about. But when you think about it personally, what are you afraid of exactly? Like when you think about this, what starts to go through your head? What's the story that goes through your head?
But I am having a hard time hearing. I'm sorry. Did you ask me what my objective was?
No, I said when you think about all the things that could go wrong, what's the story that starts going through your head about it? So, for example, do you feel like maybe you're out of control? Do you feel do you hear yourself saying in your head something like what if this horrible thing happens, or what if that horrible thing, like those kinds of things? When you think about all the things that could go wrong when you're planning your trip, what's the story that's going through your head about all of that?
Yes, I'm thinking I'm landing at 9 o'clock tomorrow night, and maybe there'll be protests in the city I'm flying into. And then when I rent a car on another day to go drive down and see my grandkids, I'm thinking, will there be protests in their city then?
Okay. All right, so there's kind of that. Now, what you're talking about here is what we call catastrophizing. There's a lot of what-if thinking. I have a friend of mine who talks about how she goes from zero to widow in 60 seconds if her husband's late from work. That's catastrophizing. It's that kind of, well, what if this horrible thing happens, or what if that horrible thing happens? And that's a cognitive distortion, like I was talking about with Thomas. It's a lie that kind of goes through our head that distorts the truth. And spiritually speaking, again, St. Ignatius of Loyola would call that a desolation. It's a lie that Satan whispers in our spiritual ear to take our eyes off of what God really wants us to focus on. So my suggestion to you, when you're kind of thinking, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens, it's important to do some what's called grounding. You kind of take a deep breath, and you recognize, I'm safe now, I'm healthy now, I have a good mind that God has given me to respond to the problems that are in front of me. Let me deal with the thing that's in front of me right now. So, do I have my boarding pass? Do I have my things packed? Refocus yourself on what you need to do in this moment, and, give that future to God. Now, I know that's easy to say, but the reality is grace is in the situation, not in your imagination. right? So we sometimes create these imaginary problems, and I realize that these things could happen, right? But they're not happening right now. So the protest or these horrible things, they're happening in your imagination. And there's no grace in that, because you don't need grace to live in your imagination. You need grace to live in your present. So, bringing that present moment to God and saying, Lord, help me make sure that I've packed everything. Let me go through my luggage here and make sure that I've got that. Help me to remember to bring everything I need to bring with me. Let me attend to what's in front of me right now. And by grounding yourself in this present moment and bringing God into that present moment, you're allowing that grace to flow into the situation so that you can experience peace, as opposed to living in a future imaginary situation where everything's falling apart. It's a little trick that you can do. I do talk more about other strategies that you can use longer term in my book, Unworried: A Life Without Anxiety, but this will at least get you through the trip tomorrow, Rita.
Okay, Rita.
Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless you.
God bless you too. And that crazy phone connection. 888-318-7884. I know we got another caller on the line, but I think we're still having call issues. So 888-318-7884, the number if you'd like to give it a try. Our guest is Dr. Greg Popcak. He is the host with his wife, Lisa, of More to Life. With
Wife for Life.
I hope so. I would hope so.
On More to Life, yes.
And you can hear that mornings on the worldwide, the global EWTN Catholic Radio Network. You're also the founder of the Pastoral Solutions Institute, and that's at CatholicCounselors.com.
Yes, sir.
So just real quick before we go to another caller, what do you do at the Pastoral Solutions Institute?
There you go. Yeah, CatholicCounselors.com. Since 1999, we've been providing Catholic integrated telecounseling services. I know a lot of people have become familiar with the idea of telemental health, telecounseling now since the pandemic, but we've been doing that since 1999 with Catholics all over the world. I have a staff of 11 pastoral counselors who are all fully licensed, but also trained in pastoral theology. So we integrate both the contemporary insights from counseling psychology and the timeless wisdom of our Catholic faith to help people develop truly comprehensive solutions to their personal, emotional, and relational struggles. So, the whole point of the Pastoral Solutions Institute is to help connect faithful people with faithful resources through counseling, through telecounseling. So, folks can learn more at CatholicCounselors.com.
888-318-7884. The number. Up next is Ryan in Buffalo, New York, listening on the Station of the Cross there in Buffalo. Ryan, your question for Dr. Greg Popcak.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
We can, Ryan. That's actually kind of a nice change for this hour. We can hear you just fine.
Look at that.
All right, great. Okay, so the question I have is, where's the line in with these psychological issues between psychological disorder and demonic influence? Are they usually kind of analogous, kind of the same thing, or are they very separate things? Just because I've noticed a lot in scripture and old stories of the saints. It's usually a lot of the stories there seems to be things that could be viewed as mental disorders, being described as demonic influence. I guess I'm wondering what the how we distinguish those things from each other.
Okay, Dr.
Yeah, thanks. And you notice in Scripture as well, for example, that a lot of physical disorders were attributed to demonic influence or to sin. So part of that is an incomplete vision of science and how the physical world works, and so so there are sort of two sides to the answer to this question. Okay, every single one of us, to whatever degree we are experiencing emotional problems or not, are affected by temptation constantly. So even I know it's a little silly to imagine it this way, but the old kind of cartoon idea of an angel on one shoulder and the devil on another. The reality is the Holy Spirit is constantly whispering in our spiritual ear, counseling us, giving us consolations that help us draw closer to God no matter what our circumstances are and be the person that God wants us to be, while at the same time Satan is whispering in the other spiritual ear, trying to pull us away from God and whispering lies into our minds that if we attend to them and don't combat them, will lead us away from God and the person that God wants us to be. That's why in 2 Corinthians 10:5, St. Paul talks about demolishing every argument that stands against the knowledge of God and holding every thought captive in obedience to Christ. So there's a certain degree to which we all need to practice that kind of good, to use an old term, mental hygiene that allows us to be on top of those thoughts that pass through our mind and to test those spirits and say, is this thought that's going through my mind right now from God and leading me closer to God and the person God wants me to be? Or is this thought pulling me away from God and the person that God wants me to be by leading me into a sense of powerlessness, isolation, self-pity, self-indulgence? And so, by being aware of those thoughts, both psychologically and spiritually, we can practice good psychological health and also good spiritual health at the same time.
All right, Ryan?
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And I guess I'm also, if you have a moment to talk about this too,
I'll tell you what, Ryan, we're having trouble hearing you again. We're having trouble with the sound again, and we got to take a quick break. Hang on. I will let you have a follow-up with Dr. Popcak when we come back, and we'll try to get that sound on that call back up to top quality. Dr. Greg Popcak is our guest. 888-318-7884 is our number. It's anxious times. If you'd like some help with that anxiety, give a call.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
Why does everyone need to be saved? Does the Bible say we're saved by faith alone and not by works? What does the Catholic Church teach about heaven, hell, and purgatory? In 20 Answers Salvation, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, laying out the beautiful story of how God calls us out of sin, justifies us, makes us holy, and leads us to everlasting life with Him. 20 Answers Salvation is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Every Catholic has heard the challenge. How can you believe that? Don't you know the Bible says? It's a challenge we have to meet. If we can't reconcile apparent contradictions between Scripture and Catholic teaching, how can our faith survive? And if we can't answer our Protestant brothers and sisters, how will they ever come to embrace the fullness of the faith? In Meeting the Protestant Challenge, apologist Carlo Broussard gives you the knowledge and tools you need to answer 50 of the most common Bible-based objections to Catholicism. Be prepared to give an answer. Order your copy of Meeting the Protestant Challenge today by calling 844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. All right, Robert, I hope the sound is better, but do your best. Just give us the question just real quick, and we'll see what Dr. Popcak can do with it, because we're having sound trouble. Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, all right. Hopefully you can hear me. So basically what I'm wondering is just, and I'm wondering this because, I was diagnosed with, OCD in the past, and I, I worked with a counselor, and, it got better. But, one thing I've always wondered, to what extent, can those, mental disorders, be, attributed as something demonic? Is that an irrational, thought to have, that those
Yes.
sorts of things might have demonic influence?
Right. So there's spiritual influence that I was describing in the last segment there that would apply to everyone, but it would not be fair to say that a disorder like OCD, for example, was demonic. In fact, even the thought about that, if it's an intrusive or bothersome thought, might be a symptom of the OCD. So, I actually talk about this a bit in Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety. And when the church investigates, for example, the possibility of demonic influence, they make sure that the person who is being considered for an exorcism has gotten both the proper medical and psychological evaluation to rule out all possible medical and psychological problems before they'll even consider direct demonic influence. So there are spiritual influences, that we all encounter, but in terms of demonic influences causing specific mental disorders, that would not be the case. And so it's important to really work with a good, faithful mental health professional to help you kind of sort out, which of those symptoms are really the direct result of, for example, with OCD, there's a part of your brain called the right caudate nucleus. Okay, it's in your limbic system, and it's the part of the brain that's responsible for this sort of sick feeling in your gut that says there's something wrong here. But because that's part of the lower brain, the higher brain is like looking around saying, I don't see anything wrong, what's wrong? But your lower brain says, but yeah, there's a problem. And the higher brain says, no, I don't see anything. And then they start fighting with each other. And the brain doesn't like to be at war with itself, right? So then pretty soon it's sort of like a parent who's got a kid who's bugging them and just gives them some busy work to do. So the higher brain is like, yeah, you should worry about washing your hands. That'll make you feel better. And it just kind of creates this sort of mythical solution to resolve the tension between the lower brain and the higher brain. But what's really happening there, there's literally a brain cramp, like a pinched nerve. Like you can get in your leg or anywhere else. You can get it in that part of the brain called the right caudate nucleus, which gives you the feeling of something very wrong, even though there isn't really anything wrong. So it is an actual physical problem to experience that sense of guilt and anxiety over something with OCD. But it's like any other cramp, the way to do it is to kind of breathe through it, and that the obsession will go away in maybe 15, 20 minutes if you're able to kind of breathe through it in a particular kind of way. And a good CBT therapist can help get you through that. But I do talk about that in Unworried as well. But to go back to your question, no, it would not be fair to say that it's a demonic influence that causes a specific mental disorder.
Thanks, Ryan. And thank you, Dr. Popcak. I was going to mention the right cognate thingy.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if you would. I'm glad you brought it up because I didn't want to have to bring it up for you.
I thank you.
888-318-7884, our number. We're talking anxiety with the man who can help. We're coming at anxiety from a position of Catholic faith and a long, long history of Catholic teaching, and also with all the best tools of science as well. Let's go to Matt in Columbus, Ohio, listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Matt, your question for Dr. Greg Popcak.
Hi, Dr. Greg. First, thank you for Just Married and what's the name of the baby that they call it? Then Comes Baby.
Then Comes Baby, yeah. Thank you.
They were huge helps to us.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Matt. And hey, listen, I'll throw this out there since you mentioned you're Just Married. If you come over to our social media on Facebook at More to Life, you'll find out more about the Catholic Marriage Summit that Lisa and I are speaking at, and that might give you some more tools too. But thank you for the plug for Just Married and Then Comes Baby. But what's your question for us?
So I know we're talking about anxiety and everything. Personally, I don't struggle with anxiety, and I know I'm not alone in this. But rather than reacting with anxiety to things like the government shutting down, businesses and churches and all that. And then, events with all of the protests and riots and businesses closing because of that and people losing their businesses. I don't feel anxiety when I hear about these reports. I really just react with anger. It's like a scoffing, like, oh, here we go again. And I know that's not a good reaction. I see it in other people, and it's not particularly attractive in them, so I'm sure that I don't make it look any better. So I was wondering, some practical advice for.
Can I ask just as a follow-up to that? I mean, are you feeling, even with these things aside, would you say that you're feeling generally pretty stressed out overall, or is it mostly just about this?
No, I'm a pretty well-stressed kind of guy. I'm a high school teacher, so the last couple of months have actually been, kind of calm for me. I had to do some teaching online, but, generally my work hasn't been exceptionally stressful.
Okay. Well, that's good. I just asked that because a lot of times whenever we have that reaction, it's because it just feels like, the news is just one more thing that I have to handle that's sort of out of my control. But I'm glad to hear that you don't feel that way. What I would say is let's talk about what anger really is. Okay, so, all of our emotions are actually part of our body, right? God gives us our body so that it can work for our good. He gave us our emotions as part of our body to work for our good as well. So even though sin has disrupted the way our body is supposed to work and the way our emotions are supposed to work, at their core, they're supposed to be doing good things. So what is anger supposed to be doing in God's divine plan? Well, it's an emotional reaction to an injustice, right? Anger is an appropriate reaction to seeing something that's unjust and not the way it should be. And it's meant to emotionally engage us so that we can do something about it, so that we can create more order. And so when we talk about righteous anger, right, versus the sin of wrath, righteous anger is when we have a response to something that is appropriate, proportionate, and productive, right? So if my anger motivates me to do something about that injustice that's proportionate to the problem, that's appropriate, that produces some good thing, then that's righteous anger, right? And that's a godly thing. If, on the other hand, I have a response to my anger that's inappropriate, unproductive, and disproportionate, then that's the sin of wrath, because basically I'm just pouring gas on the fire and spreading it all over the place. So, it's natural to feel angry about unjust things, and there's a lot of injustice in the world right now, and we're seeing it spread out in the 24-hour news cycle all the time. The question is, so the problem isn't how do you stop feeling anger, it's how do you express that anger in a way that helps to produce greater order and peace in your life. So what I would suggest to you is that anger isn't so much a call to action as it is a call to prayer. So when you're feeling that angry response to the news, to just bring it to God and say, Lord, this is on my heart. These people that I'm seeing suffering are on my heart. These things that are going wrong in the world are on my heart. Help me to know how you want to respond to it in my corner of the world so that I can be an instrument of peace, so that I can be an instrument of your goodness and your grace. And maybe God's going to call your attention to something you need to do for your wife or for your kid or for your students. Maybe God's going to ask you to bring some greater order into something that's going on in your life. But I can tell you that once you kind of consecrate that anger to God and ask him to guide you in expressing it in a way that's appropriate and proportionate and productive, he's going to help you connect to whatever's going on in your life that he wants to bring greater order through you out of. But that anger initially is just that recognition that there's injustice. So then we need to bring it to God and say, Lord, help me know what you want me to do about the injustice that I'm reacting to in my own life.
Matt, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Dr. Greg Popcak is our guest. Among his 20 or so books is the book Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety, and it is not a false promise. You can find that wherever you get your books, I'm sure. Dr. Greg Popcak is also the host with his wife, Lisa, of More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak each morning on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Up next, Omar, here in Pomona, California, watching on YouTube. Omar, your question for Dr. Popcak.
Hey, guys. So I don't consider myself to be like a particularly anxious person. However, lately I have been feeling anxiety, and I know that it is because, like, when I get nervous, I get like sweaty, like armpits. Like, I don't know if that's like normal or what, but yeah. So I'm a cradle Catholic, right? And I used to go to church a lot as a little kid with my family, and then as a family we kind of stopped. Most of us still identify as Catholics, but since I moved out, I've been going to Mass by myself, and really, since COVID, I've been consuming a lot of Catholic media, such as Catholic Answers videos on YouTube and stuff like that. So I really try to tell my family how I try to discuss like how important it should be, our faith should be as part of our life, and I get pretty anxious when I meet resistance, and I don't know how to overcome the anxiety because it might be hindering my ability to resonate with them. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, no, it makes sense. Let me ask. So, is there something specific, like when you say you get resistance from them, like what are you guys talking about, and what kind of resistance are you getting? I just want to kind of get a sense of the quality of the relationship here.
Well, Okay, cool. So I can give an example of
perfect. Yeah,
when I speak with my sister. She doesn't have that much faith in the church. She like openly disagrees with a lot of things that the church is adamant about. For example, I was discussing abortion with her the other day, and I was trying
just
my
randomly, or because she was considering an abortion, or has had an abortion, or just sort of as a concept.
No, it's kind of like an abstract concept to her because, to my knowledge, I don't think she's ever been pregnant.
That's
but
fine.
She just feels really strongly against what I believe and what the church believes. So
well, let me jump in, Omar, because I that's what I really wanted to get at, because the anxiety there. I mean, look, it's a good thing to be able to have, faithful, intelligent conversations with people about these kinds of topics. So I'm not saying don't have these discussions, okay? But what I am going to say is that when you're talking with somebody who's not a believer, right? Even though she was raised in the church, she's not practicing now. She's not really a believer in that sense. It can be very easy to reduce the faith to this sort of intellectual exercise. And I think the anxiety that you're feeling around that, it may be in part that it's sort of missing the point, that what she really needs to do is experience God as a person and experience God's love for her, not to get into intellectual debates about particular points of doctrine or social issues, but to really talk, let her talk to you about her life and what's going on in her life, and be really concerned and interested in what's going on in her life. And when she, complains about something, you might say, what, I'm so sorry you're going through that. That really breaks my heart. I'm going to pray for you. And in fact, Lord, please bless my sister and help her to know how much you love her and be there with her. Boom. Amen. That was a 3-second prayer, but you brought God into the conversation and allowed her to experience him as a real person who cares about her real life, instead of it being this sort of intellectual thing that she's allowed to keep at arm's distance. And because you're feeling like, if I can't convince her about this, then she won't accept that God is real and that God matters. But the only way to allow somebody to experience that God is real and God matters is to let them have a personal experience of God. And the only way to do that is by being present to your sister and loving her and empathizing with her, and then praying for those little moments where you can bring God into it too, like I just gave that example. So, it's okay to back off of some of those arguments and focus more on just loving her and being present to her and bringing God into the moment with her.
Omar, I'm going to say thank you because we have to head to the break. Thank you so much for your call. We've still got Dr. Greg Popcak with us, so if those are on the line, stay on the line. We'll take this very quick break. We'll come right back with more discussion of these anxious times with Dr. Popcak right after this.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
She is one of the most beloved saints of all time, honored as the Saint of the Little Way.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
Saint Thérèse of Lisieux entered the Carmelite convent of Lisieux in 1888 and survived only 9 more years. Still, her extraordinary holiness and prayer life prompted her superiors to have her write an autobiography, The Story of a Soul. It became a spiritual classic.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Greg Popcak is our guest. Our number is 888-318-7884. I don't want to go the whole program, though, and not recommend the new book, Secrets from Heaven, Hidden Treasures of Faith in the Parables and Conversations of Jesus. You might be wanting to spend some time with Jesus these days, and this is a really good book just for that. The chapters are brief, digestible chapters on actual conversations and parables that Jesus had, and when you or gave, and when you think about who he is, his words are just endlessly precious, and there's very few people who can open them up for you like Father Sebastian Walsh. So we do have a deal on it. You just put in the promo code LAMB, LAMB, but make sure you use a silent B. When you check out, you get 25% off of this book at shop.catholic.com. Just put in the word LAMB, L-A-M-B, at shop.catholic.com and get 25% off right now on Secrets from Heaven, Hidden Treasures of Faith in the Parables and Conversations of Jesus. As I said, our guest, Dr. Greg Popcak, and up next is Rick in Newport, Kentucky, listening on 740 AM Sacred Heart Radio. Rick in Newport, Kentucky, your question, please.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. Doctor, I had a question in regards to the presence of the evil one and spirits, whether it be oppression or suppression or some kind of presence, how much and what the levels could possibly be. How much should we fear these levels, or how much should we fear this presence? Mm-hmm. And maybe a person may be putting too much stress on the presence, or maybe not. It actually feels the presence of evil and the evil one, or is it sometimes a psychological presence? Prayer life is very, very good, 2 or 3 times a day, and it's not just for good luck's sake. It's not a good luck charm. Rosary every day, and a deep prayer life, sometimes even almost to a point of ecstasy.
Okay. Well, look. So I'm going to share with you my favorite story about. Sounds weird. My favorite story about evil.
That does sound weird.
So Saint John Vianney. Saint John Vianney. He's the patron saint of pastors. This is maybe an apocryphal story, but it's a cool story, so we're going to go with it. So Saint John Vianney, actually, this is absolutely true. He used to be tormented by Satan. Satan would call him names, right? Basically, we call him potato eater, which was was basically calling him a peasant, a backwoods hillbilly kind of character, right? He'd insult Saint John Vianney. Saint John Vianney would experience physical manifestations of Satan, where he would come down in the middle of the night, and Satan would be throwing pots around in his kitchen. Well, one night he woke up to hear that sound of pots being thrown around the house and things smashing, and he went down to see what was going on, and there in the middle of his kitchen, in the middle of the floor, he saw Satan, and he said, "Oh, it's you," and he went back to bed. And that's the response that we have to the presence of evil, to not ignore it, to not deny it, to not pretend it's not there, but to not be glamorized by it, to not be fascinated by it, but to be, because the Christian walk is not about running away from evil. It's about running into the arms of God's love. And so when you experience that sense of the presence of evil, that sense of oppression, that sense of ill ease that comes from kind of thinking about the demonic, I'd really encourage you to turn your eyes toward God and say, Lord, fill me with your love right now. Because what's happening in those moments, I think the devil is trying to pull us away from that experience of God's love. He wants, he doesn't want us to be confirmed in that sense of love and God's presence and God's grace. So he wants to kind of fascinate us with this kind of scary nightmare over here that kind of draws our attention away from God. And so in those times, it's just especially important to close our eyes, to take that deep breath, and to look at God and just say, Lord, fill me with your love. Help me to know your presence and to be an instrument of your grace in this moment. And you kind of, if you have to say anything to Satan, you do what St. John Vianney said, and you say, oh, it's you. And then you go back to rest in the arms of God's love.
Rick, thank you very much. I'm going to move to Ray in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest. And Ray, your question for Dr. Popcak.
Hey guys, thanks for taking my call. I am like many normal Americans, just watching the news and watching all these things that go on and trying to keep my daily life as normal as possible. And I see people like Nancy Pelosi, who supports abortion, hold up the Bible and act as if she's more Catholic than the rest of us. And at the same time, the bishop in her area, I think his name is Wilton Gregory, denounces President Trump for being Christian and sitting in front of the church that was on fire the other night and talking about the goodness of the human being and Christ is the thing that brings us all together. Yet Nancy Pelosi stands up there and spews lies about abortion. And that causes me such consternation because the church is doing nothing to denounce her voice. Nobody's saying.
Ray, I'm going to let. And I apologize for this. I really don't want to cut you off just because you're saying things that some might find controversial. It's just that we can't hear that well. So, but I think you heard what Ray is saying.
The sound's not great, but I got it. It's just basically the idea that there are, he sees things in the news that are especially related to the church and politics, and it's giving him this sense of anxiety and frustration because, he just sees it as an injustice and he's not sure what to do about it, and that causes him, in his word, consternation or anxiety. So let's talk about, kind of where to go with that. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the program, in my book, Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety, I talk about how anxiety is kind of the result of looking at a problem and saying, I have to do something about this, but there's nothing I can do. But I have to do something, but there's nothing I can do. But I have to do something, but there's nothing I can do. But I have to do something, and then you sort of spin out, right? And sometimes we look at things that we genuinely can't do anything about. Converting a politician that I don't have any relationship with, that's beyond my power. But there are things that God is asking me to do that are within my power to address that particular injustice, whether it's that injustice of abortion or the injustice of, you name it, racism, whatever it is. And to be able to bring that anxiety, that emotion to God and say, look, Lord, I am experiencing this frustration, this anxiety, this anger, whatever it is. Help me to know how to respond to this in a way that will glorify you, work for the good of those around me, and help me be the person that you are calling me to be. What is it that you're calling my attention to? Again, going back to this whole idea of consolations and desolations and Satan's involvement in things. If you read the Screwtape Letters, which is a book by C.S. Lewis, it's a fictional account of a sort of a superior demon who's writing letters to a trainee demon about how to be a good demon, right? And I can just imagine, Screwtape writing to Wormwood, his nephew, saying, if Ray has to be concerned about issues pertaining to the gospel, let him be concerned about things he can't do anything about, right? And that's what Satan is doing right now to you. He's getting you so worked up about things that you can't control that he's taking your eyes off of there's something right in front of you that God wants you to look at, but Satan doesn't want you to deal with. So by bringing that anxiety to God and saying, Lord, I'm so frustrated right now by what I'm seeing, help me to know how to respond to that. That's going to invite the Holy Spirit into that moment to help bring your eyes to something you can do that's going on in your life that Satan doesn't want you to see. Focus on that.
Ray, Ray, you got time for a follow-up. Did you want to follow up with Dr. Popcak?
I would love a follow-up, yeah.
Go ahead, just real quick, Ray, just because we can't hear you that well. Just real quick.
I guess the thing is like, the thing is like, I understand what you're saying and I agree with you, but the point is that she stands on a platform before all.
Yeah, but Ray, you're not okay. But you don't understand what I'm saying because you're going right back to it. Let me stop focusing on the things I can do in my own life. Let me concentrate on this thing I can't control and get all worked up about that, because that's what we can become addicted to that, and that's what Satan wants you to do. I understand that there's a real injustice there, and if you bring this to prayer and God asks you to write a letter or an email, a charitable letter or email in response to that, I mean, that's the most you can really do. You can pray for those people that you're concerned about. That's all great, but I can guarantee you that there is something that's going on in your life right now that Satan does not want you to look at. And he is making this big, angry consternation thing out there to distract you from doing what he wants you to do what God wants you to do right now. That's what you need to be focusing on. Thanks, Ray. I appreciate the call.
Ray, thank you very, very much. I don't think there are 10 people in the world who don't, in point of fact, actually know the Catholic Church's teaching on abortion. I mean, we're the most famous people in the world for teaching that abortion is wrong. So I sometimes think that, yeah, there's all this, flack thrown up here and there, but the Catholic message about abortion is clear, and it does get out, and people know it.
Intellectually, that's absolutely true.
Well, yeah.
It's the personal connection piece, like we were talking about with Omar earlier, right? We can turn abortion and other important social issues, whether like racism or anything else, into an intellectual debate or a political debate, instead of an opportunity to bring Christ into that moment, to encounter that person's heart and soften their heart to his love and his grace.
Yeah.
And as long as we allow our faith to just be a political or an intellectual exercise, it's always easy for people to keep that stuff at arm's length. But when we bring God into that moment and allow them to experience His love, that's what softens their heart to the doctrines and the teachings.
Dr. Greg Popcak has been our guest. You should check out his books. He's got a whole bunch of them. The one we have discussed this hour, Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety. Also, if you are in search of good Catholic counseling, you can check out CatholicCounselors.com. And if you're in search of a really good Catholic radio program, and you've already used up both hours of this one, you can go look for More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak on EWTN. You can get the podcast version, or you can listen live each morning on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Dr. Greg Popcak, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, I had a lot of fun.
And thanks to everybody. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here for 2 hours, open forum on Catholic Answers Live.